Tonight, I'm very glad to welcome back our speaker. We did part one last month, Jim Haxby. We have some new people here. I'll go through the bio. Jim has undergraduate degrees in chemistry and pharmacy, a PhD in pharmacology. He's been in medical research at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla, California, as well as a practicing pharmacist for 25 years. In the collecting arena, he has been a stamp collector for 77 years and a coin collector for 72 years. Dr. Haxby has written several catalogs and books on Canadian coinage, tokens, and paper money, and is the author of a huge catalog, 72,000 illustrations of U.S. obsolete paper money. He's a former deputy curator of the Canadian National Currency Collection of the Bank of Canada, past president of the Asheville, North Carolina Coin Club. He's a director of the American Airmail Society and the president of the Stamp Smarter Foundation, which is charged with preserving and furthering the website. And we're looking forward tonight, which is part two. We're looking at the Chicago World's Fair, a Century of Progress, and we looked at the Balboa issues. And tonight we'll be focusing on the Zeppelins. And I think, Jim, you're going to be doing National Airmail Week, I think, coming up in May on the schedule. So we're
That's
looking
right.
forward to that. Yeah.
Everything
Uh,
you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask about National Airmail
Well,
Week.
I have all these neat covers, and I think I got a lot of them from Al here. I think and there's a lot of Lancaster issues there. I just want to know a lot about them. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Jim to our meeting tonight.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Um, this presentation is going to actually be, there's going to be an extra part thrown in here because I couldn't resist throwing in a few more slides. So it's going to be part 1.5 that I'm going to show first. And I'm going to have to, I guess you can, well, actually you have it, don't you, Paul?
I have part one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
Why
try
don't
to call it up?
Yeah, why don't you call it up?
Yeah, this is a test to see if my thing worked. I
Yeah.
did do some work on over the weekend, downloading things and updating
Now
entire
it has
screen.
no sound and
Yeah,
and so all you have to do is click to advance from slide to
share
slide when I request it.
application Windows desktop.
I'm basically in this first little part going to be talking about two different aircraft that appeared at the Century of Progress. The first one was a Sikorsky amphibian plane, the S-338, that flew rides. People could pay for getting rides on this plane, and I do mention it in the bigger one, in the bigger part of my presentation. But I have a better picture of it that I can't resist showing because it allows you to see why it was nicknamed the Flying Duck. You have to look at it at a certain angle to be able to appreciate the flying duck aspect.
I am still trying, Jim. Let's see.
Right.
Um, I'm not getting anything close. I'm getting
Okay.
sharing, and it's not.
Well, give me the ability to share with me to run
Yeah,
it, and I'll see if I can pull it up from here.
yeah. I
You can share.
Okay. Okay. And share. Okay. No, I don't want to do that. Down here. Yeah. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Okay, here's the Sikorsky S-38. The fellow at the left there with the bald head is the designer, Igor Sikorsky. And you can see why this plane has been described as the flying duck. If you look at the two parts of the windshield here, those are the eyes, and then the long nose is the beak of the duck. So this type plane was present at the Century of Progress, and people could pay to get a ride on this. And there's from a publication, that's the actual plane that was at the Century of Progress. The other plane I want to talk about was an important step in the evolution of land-based airliners. In the early 1930s, the typical land-based airliner looked like this Ford Trimotor, and which has sometimes been called the Tin Goose. And you can see on the fuselage here, it's the metal is corrugated, and you can also see that there are no nacelles on the engines and so on. And this plane had a lot of drag, and it was not all that comfortable for the passengers to fly in. But that was the state of the art in the late 20s, the first part of the 30s. But then Boeing introduced in 1933, it first flew in February of 1933, a new airliner called the Boeing 247. And this one had some revolutionary features. It was the first 2 to 3 engine airliner that had stressed shell construction in its fuselage and wings. And that resulted in much less drag and much more strength. It had retractable landing gear. That was another new feature. And it also had de-icing boots. For example, you can see the black stripes there on the leading surfaces to help reduce ice buildup. Its cruising speed was 190 miles an hour, and its range was 745 miles. In the Travel and Transport Building in the Chicago Fair, they had one of these 247s on display, a static display, and you can see a ramp going up, stairs going up here. People could go and walk here and then come down here. And it was a big hit. Here's another picture of it with visitors around, and the nose is open. You can see baggage in there. So it was a major attraction. This plane in itself was not, although it had some revolutionary features, was not so important because of the fact that it was obsolete almost immediately. The introduction of the 747 spurred the production of the Douglas DC series. And the way that happened is kind of interesting. First order for the Boeing 247 was 60 planes, and that order was made by Boeing Air Transport, which was part of United Airlines. TWA, the airline that Charles Lindbergh was a consultant with, also wanted to have this plane. And so they placed an order with Boeing, but Boeing refused the order because those first 60 planes that Boeing Air Transport had ordered got priority because Boeing owned the Boeing Air Transport was associated with the Boeing Aircraft Company. So they didn't want to give the planes to TWA. So TWA turned around and approached Donald Douglas to build them an airliner that would compete with the Boeing 247. Donald Douglas's solution was a single prototype plane called the DC-1. And that, which was a 12-passenger plane, and it made its maiden flight in July of 1933. And TWA immediately ordered 20 new DC planes. They wanted it to be slightly larger to make it 14 seats. And that resulted in ultimately in the delivery of the planes being called the DC-2. And there's what a DC-2 looked like. And that was a much better airplane than the Boeing 247. So the Boeing 247, remember, the first order was 60 planes. Only 15 more of the 247s were ever ordered. Because when this plane came out, the 247 was history. It was so much better. It could cruise at 190 miles an hour, and it had a range of 870 miles. So it was better than the 247. And it also was air conditioned and was much more comfortable for the passengers.
Jim, how many did it hold? How many
Yeah.
passengers?
How many did that hold?
Yeah,
It held 14.
14. Okay.
Yep. And the Boeing 247 held 10. And
Hmm.
even worse, the 247, you may have been in some small airliners, because there have been some other than that had the wing spar going right across the aisle in the center. So you had to walk across this big hump in the center of the aisle when you were walking from the front of the plane to the back. Not exactly a good design. The DC-3, this is a DC-3, which is the critical one. There were about 200 DC-2s made. And interestingly enough, United Airlines, which had the Boeing 247, didn't order more 247s. They started ordering DC-3s in 1937 as soon as they were available. In fact, by 1938, 95% of all commercial carriers were using the DC-3. So the DC-3 is a little bigger than the DC-2, and it had some other improvements. And it was a wonderful plane, and there were over 14,000 of those made. For a long time, it held the record as the largest production of any airliner in the world. So that is the little part that I added. So now
Thank
we
you.
can go to the main presentation. And can you pull that up, Paul?
I can't.
You
I
can't.
I
Okay.
cannot do screen sharing. I don't know
Yeah.
what's happened. I'm gonna have to get some consultation in.
Okay.
What it was before the last meeting, I had updated the software, the operating system for my iMac, and that's when it just changed things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll
Uh,
see.
appreciate, Sorry for that. I
Yeah.
did notice with the tri-motor, we had a presenter, Bill Schultz, several years ago, talk about Rattlesnake Island and how they used the tri-motors. I said, that looks familiar. And then I read it. It says City of Clinton or Port of Clinton,
Yeah.
where where they took off from on the mainland in Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm
So
not sure how.
Jim, you're at the right place. If you hit, you can add a tab and you can get to because you said it's a YouTube, right?
Yeah, I've got to figure out how to get to YouTube from
Hit the,
here.
go back to your Internet Explorer where you just were, and then hit the plus sign, upper left.
Upper left plus. I don't. Okay, it's
Yep.
there. Okay. 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 That one is not the right one. There are two.
I think the one you showed last time, part two was on the end of part one,
No, it wasn't.
wasn't it?
I don't think so.
Go to part one
Yeah.
and click on that. And then scroll down just a little bit.
I should.
There it is. Yep. It's there. Go back up. Right there. On the right. Part two. There
Oh,
it is.
yeah, there it is. Good.
Uh-huh.
Good eye.
Good. Thank you all.
Okay. That's Tommy Dorsey, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Shoot. That was a mistake.
Welcome to part two of our presentation.
Get rid of this.
Aerofilately in the Century of Progress exhibition, 1933 to 1934. In this part, we'll present a postscript to General Italo Balbo's fair visit in 1933, as well as the competitive aviation events at the fair, the balloon and air races. This is followed by the Goodyear blimps at the fair, the visits by the dirigibles Macon and Graf Zeppelin, and the demonstrations of the Adams nonstop airmail pickup and delivery system. In part one, we covered the visit of the Italian air fleet to the fair in some detail. One later aspect of this visit is worth noting here. In his jealousy over General Balbo's successful visit to Chicago, Mussolini was particularly frustrated by the naming of a street in Chicago after Balbo. Il Duce requested that a street or building be named after him too, but that didn't happen. Quite possibly, in seeking such a favor, Mussolini arranged to have a monument created to commemorate Balbo's visit and given to the city of Chicago in 1934. The upper portion consisted of a 13 by 3-foot column taken from the site of Prospetto Amare, a building dating from the 1st century BC in the ancient port town of Ostia near Rome. The column was placed on a contemporary base of limestone with a special message from the people of fascist Italy inscribed on it. In this slide, we see on the left the monument sitting in front of the Italian pavilion at the fair on July 15, 1934, the first anniversary of Balbo's visit. And on the right is the monument today. Let's turn now to the two major competitive aeronautical events held at the Century of Progress, a balloon race and an airplane race. The Gordon Bennett Balloon Race was a prestigious international competition first held in 1906. The winning team received the Gordon Bennett Trophy, and their home country gained the opportunity to host the race the following year. The 1932 race in Basel, Switzerland, had been won by the American team led by Lieutenant Commander TGW Tex Settle. Hence, the race was to be held in the United States in 1933, and the Century of Progress organizers leapt at the opportunity to have the race begin in Chicago. The cover here commemorated the race, though it was not carried by any of the contestants. Although some covers might have been carried by contestants, we are not aware of any. The 1933 Gordon Bennett race ended up with 6 entries, one each representing Belgium, France, Germany, and Poland, as well as 2 from the United States. One of the U.S. entries, the balloon Navy, represented the U.S. Navy and was piloted by Lieutenant Commander T.G.W. Tex Settle. The other U.S. entry, Goodyear 9, was a civilian balloon piloted by Ward T. Van Orman. Some 80,000 spectators were on hand for the start of the race on July 2nd. The winner of the 1933 race was the Polish team, led by Franciszek Hynek, with a distance of 846 miles. Hynek would go on to win the race in 1934 as well. The photo at the left shows Hynek with the cup in 1934. Hynek's 1933 balloon is depicted on the right in a Polish stamp from 1981. The international air races at the fair were sponsored by the Chicago Daily News and received much publicity. Originally scheduled for July 1st to 4th, the July 2 race program was moved to July 5th to allow a day for staging the start of the balloon race. The air race program included numerous aeronautical events besides the races themselves. Audiences of tens of thousands of people thrilled to death-defying stunts like acrobatic flying and parachute jumps. On July 4th, the crowd of onlookers was estimated to have been 120,000. The air race was held on a course set up at Curtiss Wright Reynolds Airport in Glenview, a Chicago suburb. Among the list of notable pilots in the races were Jimmy H. Doolittle and Jimmy G. Haslett. Doolittle was the holder of the world land plane speed record, 294 miles an hour, set in 1932, and Haslett held the west to east transcontinental time record, 10 hours and 19 minutes, also set in 1932. Another flyer, James R. Waddell, would become the fastest of the three Jimmies. Waddell was both a flyer and an aircraft designer. Flying a Waddell-Williams plane of his own design, he broke Doolittle's speed record during the air races, with a speed of 305 miles an hour. Some aeronautical features at the fair were essentially air rides for a fee. They included a ride in a Sikorsky amphibian plane, balloon rides, and rides in a Goodyear blimp. For corporate advertising purposes, at the Century of Progress, Goodyear sent two of its existing airships, the Puritan and the Reliance. A public landing and takeoff area was set up on the mainland where people could pay for rides to see the fair from the air. No covers were carried on these flights. In 1923, the American Goodyear Company and the German Zeppelin Company formed a partnership in Akron called the Goodyear Zeppelin Corporation. In 1929, the corporation built what they called their air dock, a huge airship factory and hangar. This remarkable structure, which still stands today in Akron, Ohio, is 1,175 feet long and 211 feet high. For 40 years, it was the largest building in the world without interior supports. This building is so large that it has its own weather inside, so there can be clouds and rain. In 1928, the Goodyear Zeppelin Company won a contract from the U.S. Navy to build two airships, actually flying aircraft carriers, each 785 feet long and carrying several airplanes. The result was the U.S.S. Akron, christened in 1931, and the U.S.S. Macon, christened in 1933. Both were built at the air dock in Akron. The Macon carried 5 Curtiss Sparrowhawk fighters. And why place airplanes aboard airships, you ask? The radar of the time was very primitive, and the airplanes were used as a convenient way to extend the range that the airship could see for military purposes. In addition to their military duties, the American airships sometimes made public appearances. On June 13, 1933, on its fourth test flight, Macon made a flyover visit to the Century of Progress. The cover shown here is typical of the covers produced to mark the event. As was true of many of the Macon covers, none of these covers was actually flown on board the airship. At the time of the Century of Progress, rigid airships, that is, dirigibles, held a great deal of public fascination. That was particularly true of Germany's Graf Zeppelin, the largest passenger dirigible in the world. The 775-foot-long airship was completed in 1928 and named after the founder of the Zeppelin Company, Count, or Graf, Ferdinand von Zeppelin. The Graf had already visited America 4 times between 1928 and 1930. Both the airship and the head of the Zeppelin Company, Hugo Echner, were well known in the United States. Echner was not only head of the company, but he was also considered the world's finest airship commander. Like the Pan American trip of 1930, the route of the Graf or the visit to Chicago followed a triangular path, down to Brazil, up to the United States, and across to Germany. The leg from Germany to Brazil marked the Graf Zeppelin's 50th Atlantic crossing. Specifically, the cities involved in the trip were, on the incoming portion to Chicago, Friedrichshafen, the base, Recife, Rio de Janeiro, Recife, Miami, Akron, and Chicago, and on the outgoing portion, Chicago to Akron to Seville to Friedrichshafen. The visit of the Graf Zeppelin to the Century of Progress occurred on October 25th to 26, 1933. In some ways, it was a great success, but things were not the same as they had been on previous visits. Storm clouds were gathering. Early in 1933, Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany, and prior to the fair, his Nazi regime forced the Zeppelin Company to paint the Graf's vertical tail fins, designs based on Germany's current 2 national flags. The port fins received the black swastika in a white circle on a red background from the flag of the Nazi Party, and the starboard fins got horizontal tricolor stripes, black, white, and red, from the imperial flag. Henceforth, the airship was effectively a propaganda vehicle for the Nazis wherever it went. The Graf's new political tail markings reminded people that it represented a new regime in Germany, one that inspired some, but terrified many others. This photo shows the starboard tail markings on the Graf while it was moored at Recife. Hugo Echner was an anti-Nazi and was chafed at the Graf's political markings. As the Graf approached Chicago, Echner went into a circling pattern around the city to show off the airship. In doing this, he deliberately flew clockwise, hiding as best he could the swastika emblazoned port fins and exposing his less controversial tricolor striped starboard fins to the Chicagoans. Fair organizers were anxious to bring the Graf Zeppelin to Chicago, but an important stipulation for Echner's acceptance was the issuance of a special U.S. stamp for the flight and the payment of 85% of the profits from the sale of the stamp to the Zeppelin Company to help defray the heavy costs of the trip. With the Zeppelin's Pan American flight in 1930, when it visited New York, profits from the sale of the 3 U.S. Zeppelin stamps had been shared with the Germans. However, for the Century of Progress, both the U.S. Post Office and the President initially resisted. President Roosevelt, though a stamp collector, was not keen on a 4th U.S. Zeppelin stamp. Nevertheless, on August 18th, the Post Office Department agreed to the issue of the stamp for the trip and the payment to the Germans. The stamp, cataloged by Scott as C18, was dubbed the Baby Zepp by collectors, and it went on sale October 2, 1933. Ultimately, 324,700 were issued. The design of the Century of Progress airmail stamp shows the Graf flying westward over the ocean, with its hangar in Friedrichshafen at the right and the Federal Building on the Century of Progress Fairgrounds at the left. The Federal Building consisted of a round domed portion surrounded by 3 triangular fluted towers representing 3 branches of government. On both the 50-cent airmail and 3-cent surface mail stamps for the Century of Progress, the tops of the towers of the Federal Building are very much distorted. They look more like the points of quill pens. As shown at the left in this slide, the stamps reflect a distortion introduced into photographs of the actual building. The effect is achieved by shooting the building from the ground, close in, and looking up at a high angle. In fact, the towers were almost flat on top, with the outer corner of each tower curving up slightly, as you can see in the photo at the right, taken from a much greater height. The view of the hangar in Friedrichshafen is taken from a photograph of the entire Zeppelin Company factory complex, encompassing numerous buildings. The hangar isolated on the stamp at the far left in the picture is that in which the Graf was built and stored while in Friedrichshafen, and was accurately depicted. Now let's look at some covers. Special cachets were often applied to Century of Progress trip covers. The American cachet at the left depicts the Graf flying over one of the most interesting buildings of the fair, the Travel and Transport Building, and includes the name of the dispatch city at the bottom. It was used on all covers originating in the United States, even those that were sent to Germany by ship to be loaded onto the Graf for the beginning of the trip in Friedrichshafen. On the right is the German red triangular cachet used on covers dispatched from Friedrichshafen, regardless of their origin. Part of the cachet legend includes reference to the fact that the trip involved the 50th crossing of the Atlantic by the Graf, Friedrichshafen to Recife. The Travel and Transport Building was so interesting that I have to take a slight diversion from the covers. This building was located on the mainland south of Northerly Island. Because of the requirements of some of the larger displays in this building, the interior display space had to be free of any columns. To solve this challenge, the building's dome roof was suspended by cables from 12 steel towers on the exterior, using the same principle as a suspension bridge. The segmented dome could change diameter and move up and down depending on the environmental conditions, such as temperature or snow load. Now back to the covers. Here's a cover that originated in the U.S. and went by surface mail to Friedrichshafen to begin the air trip. For the inbound trip, i.e. towards Chicago, the amount of postage required depended on the portion of the trip the cover was intended to travel. Thus, the franking required was 50 cents to Recife or Rio de Janeiro, $1 to Miami, $1.50 to Akron or Chicago, and $2 for the Friedrichshafen to Friedrichshafen full circuit, as with this cover. And here's another Baby Zip cover. This one went from Chicago to Friedrichshafen and is franked only one stamp, 50 cents. That was the rate for any U.S. dispatch cover going to Germany. It was the Germans who had the most robust cover service for the Century of Progress trip. Their government created 3 provisional stamps, C42 to 44, for the trip by overprinting the standard Zeppelin 1, 2, and 4 Reichsmark issue with Chicago Fahrt Weltausstellung 1933, translated Chicago Trip World Exhibition 1933, in black or brown-black. For all covers boarded at Friedrichshafen, regardless of their origin, the amount of postage required depended on the portion of the trip the cover was intended to travel. For German covers, the rates included fractions of a Reichsmark, requiring other stamps in addition to the even Reichsmark C343 to 45 provisionals to pay the exact postage. This tended to lead to overfranking. The Friedrichshafen to Chicago cover in this slide had a postage requirement of 2.75 Reichsmarks, but 2 of the provisionals, totaling 3 Reichsmarks, were actually used for the postage. As was typical for other German Zeppelin provisionals, residual Chicago stamps were later used for other Zeppelin flight covers. The Zeppelin Company arranged with numerous countries to have incoming lines to Friedrichshafen for loading mail on the Graf for carriage on the Chicago trip. Each country's covers were franked with that country's stamps, but the flight confirmation cachets were the German types already seen. On an incoming cover from Romania is shown here. Of the non-U.S. countries involved in the Century of Progress flight of the Graf, only Brazil and Paraguay had special arrangements that allowed them to dispatch from Brazilian stops using franking with their own stamps and applying their own country-specific cachets. Brazilian dispatches were from either Recife or Rio de Janeiro, and Paraguayan covers were only from Recife. Lytle S. Adams was a dentist by training, but he had a prolific mind and was an avid inventor. Doubtless inspired by the on-the-fly mail pickup systems of trains, in 1923 he devised a nonstop system for the exchange of mail bags by an airplane in flight without the necessity to land. His intent was to enable smaller or isolated communities to receive airmail service without the necessity of having an airport. For 17 years, he worked tirelessly to promote his system and bring it into widespread use. The device Adams first employed for the mailbag transfer was called an exchange trap. The upper portion of the trap was a tapered chute that slanted upward at the top. The mailbag to be picked up sat in the basket of a catapult at the upper left. As the exchange plane, dangling the incoming mailbag at the end of a cable, approached the wide end of the trap, it dragged the bag up the tapering chute. When the bag reached the top, it snagged, breaking a fragile wire connecting it to the cable. Then, in rapid succession, a metal ball near the end of the cable caught a rope loop attached to the outgoing mailbag, and the catapult was activated, shooting the bag forward. By being catapulted, the bag partially caught up with the speed of the plane, and that lessened the stress of pickup on the plane's structure. Dr. Adams, ever anxious to promote his system to the public, reached an agreement with fare authorities and Graf Airlines, the operator of Cam 9, to set up a demonstration of his exchange trap as the Century of Progress. The Braniff plane would carry mail back and forth between the Chicago airport and the Century of Progress, exchanging mail bags in the trap floating in the South Lagoon. Here's an aerial shot in which, if you look carefully, you can see the mailbag exchange trap floating in the lagoon. Typically, the mail exchange was made at the lagoon 3 times daily at 2, 4, and 6 p.m. This postcard shows the Braniff plane flying low above the South Lagoon, having just made a successful exchange at the floating trap. Here we see Dr. Lytle Adams and Braniff pilot Eddie Gerber in the General Exhibits Building 3 with a working model of the Adams system. The model was used to demonstrate the exchange process to the public. Adams' aims were twofold. 1, educate the public and gain support for his exchange process. And 2, sell spectators special covers to be used in the exchanges. Proceeds from the cover sales were used to pay for the high cost of insurance for the flights. And here's a souvenir cover from their first day of service, September 20th, 1934. The last day of service was on the last day of the fair, October 31st. Here's a last day cover flown by pilot Eddie Gerber. Another type last day cover was printed from handmade type in a Gutenberg press displayed at the fair. This concludes our presentation. Hopefully you'll agree with my opinion that aviation was a well-represented theme at the Century of Progress. Thank you.
ChatGPT is great for quick answers, but when you need writing expertise, Grammarly is my go-to tool. If you're already juggling emails, docs, and chats, the last thing you want is a tool that slows you down. Grammarly fits into what you're already doing. There's no learning curve and no extra steps. Instead of just staring at a blank page, Grammarly's AI prompts give you a draft to.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Jim. You know, I have probably 100 cards from the Chicago World's Fair, several of them are the Federal Building, and I have some books from it, and I've never seen it from the air like you showed. I've only seen it when it looks like it's, three-pronged.
Yeah.
That was very interesting itself.
Thank you. I'm still trying to get back to my screen where I can see you guys.
We can see you.
Oh, good. Well, I guess I don't have to see you. Yeah, that I thought was fascinating. The amount of distortion that occurred from most of the shots that were shot from the ground up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought at first, before I saw the picture taken from higher, that it was a I knew the building couldn't look like the point of a pin, but I thought that it was a stylistic device. But then when I saw the photograph from down low and saw that the stamps reflected that perfectly, it was clear the engravers were just following that. And they probably never even saw a picture of what it really looked like.
Yeah. We are so used to drones now and seeing things at different angles. My wife follows several websites of drone photography, especially in the cities and at night. And it's just amazing views that you never would have known before. Like when I first started, aerial ascent in balloons and taking pictures, back in the mid 1800s. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Um, One other thing that I wanted to mention about the Balbo monument. As far as I know, that monument still stands. And the thing that I find so fascinating about that is there was a monument, a beautiful statue of Columbus put up on the fairgrounds and by Italian by an Italian group. And that in recent years had to be taken down because of, public threats to it. Horrible. Columbus has become horrible in some people's minds. And so they had to take that statue down of Columbus. Yet the statue from Mussolini about referring to an arch fascist, Balbo was number two in succession to become the head of the fascist party in Italy. I think that's really funny that nobody has hardly said a word about that statue dedicated to Balbo. And Balbo Avenue still remains Balbo Avenue.
It's amazing what ignorance can produce.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Are there any questions, by the way?
Questions, people. We have the American stamps for the Graf Zeppelin flights to the United States South, they were all that was in the 1930s, our stamps, 1930.
Yeah, 1930 was the Pan American. That's the three, C-13 to
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, and this was 3 years later.
Yeah, this was 3 years later. And as I mentioned in the presentation, um, Roosevelt did not want another Zeppelin stamp.
Okay.
But Eckner was pretty insistent. He needed that money to help pay for the trip. It was
Yeah.
very expensive to run the Graf.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so he got his way.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if we didn't make any
Jim,
money on it, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim, this is Pete. One of the accounts is that Cordell Hull, who was Secretary of State, was summoned to the German embassy. And the Germans basically said that it would be an affront if it wasn't done. And he had a meeting with Roosevelt, and apparently that's one of the reasons why they turned. And it was
Yeah.
very, very close to printing that stamp. Um, it's. I think there were a lot of politics involved with it. Um, the Postmaster General got involved at one point as well.
Right. Farley.
Farley, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just reading a book written by Farley on the Roosevelt years, and it makes interesting reading. And Cordell Hull was unquestionably one of the most important people of that period.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he very easily could have been president, except for some things that Roosevelt did to make sure that nobody else got to be president except him.
Well, that's why he and Farley split in 1940 because Farley thought it was his turn to be president.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Farley didn't want him to run for a third term.
No.
Or a
Well,
fourth.
again, it was unprecedented. But then I guess Roosevelt was saying, we got the war here, and then 44, he says, now we're in the war. There's always a reason.
But
Yeah.
there's good evidence that Farley is the reason that FDR became president.
Yeah,
going back to
New York.
becoming governor of New York,
Hmm.
and positioning him and anybody that ran against Hoover is going to win.
Yeah,
And Farley worked the floor extremely well at both conventions.
yeah.
Yes, well, Farley actually ran Roosevelt's campaign both for governor and for president in
That's
32 and 36.
that's
He was the
correct.
campaign chairman.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Farley was a very important guy, it turned out. And we think of him somewhat negatively because of Farley's follies, but overall, I think he was a pretty good guy.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do too with the fact that FDR would have given him any job in the administration. And here you are in the depths of the Depression, and where are the jobs? They're with the post office.
Yeah.
And I think Farley saw that as an extremely influential job during the Depression.
Yeah, and actually at the same time he was Postmaster General, he was chairman of the Democratic National Committee and the National Committee and the Committee for New York. So he had three jobs.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Then
he was
he went to what? Pepsi,
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola? Yeah.
Yep.
He made a fortune.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
He
he
wrote an
provided
autobiography.
Coca-Colas to the troops and he brought it into Europe. And Europe became a huge market and Farley became wealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Farley became wealthy enough that he could afford to donate his National Airmail Week cover collection to the National Archives,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which he did in 1958.
Well, that 1930s baseball stamp, that purple 3 center, was the background was his hometown with little church and the kids playing ball and everything like that. But I think they made
Uh,
it into Cooperstown or something. Yeah, very, very interesting gentleman.
yeah,
Eleanor tried to patch up the rift, but she was unsuccessful.
well, it was more than just over the presidential race of 1940. It went back for almost 2 years.
Was
Mhm.
it?
Uh,
Okay.
and I think Roosevelt was cutting him out of cabinet meetings and stuff or consultations. And I think personally, I mean, I haven't seen it written, but I strongly, knowing what I know about Roosevelt, I strongly suspect that Roosevelt was becoming increasingly uneasy that Farley was going to become a major candidate in 1940, and he wanted to start sabotaging him before then.
That's how you
And he
do it.
was,
You decrease people's importance. They don't get to
That's
the
right.
important meetings, and yeah.
That's right.
I've been
Yeah.
reading about the Dutch Duke and Duchess of Windsor, King Edward VIII, from the Prince of Wales.
Oh yeah, he's
And
another beauty.
yeah, when Wallace didn't like any of the people, she'd tell him, she'd just give him the eye, and he'd start with his courtiers and different secretaries. They'd be not invited to meetings and to parties and things until they just faded away.
Yeah, and he was a Nazi sympathizer too, by the looks of it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of evidence for that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
It would have
it's
been whether it would have led to betrayal, I don't know, but he certainly did not cut a good figure with that.
well, he was hoping to be made puppet king if the Nazis
Hmm.
won.
Yep, yep,
So
that would have been something.
yeah.
Scott, do you have
Anyway,
anything? You're a Roosevelt guy.
any other questions?
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's these headphones.
yeah,
So no, I'm just listening to you guys. I
yeah.
read a good book about Roosevelt, but that doesn't make me an expert. He was a little
Hmm.
bit of my time.
I think I traded Scott my Roosevelt stamp album, and you traded me your collection of the Roosevelt auction catalogs.
Oh yes,
Good deal,
yes.
made in heaven.
glad you enjoyed those.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a few things that were in his collection, a few stamps and a few covers.
Yeah.
So,
But these days you have to get them expertized because they forged the stamps like everything else. But who cares?
some of them, yeah, some of them actually have the stamp on them from the auction house.
Hmm.
But there was one lot I got. They were Bavarian stamps, and they were on a ratty old page, and I was like, you know, um, a
Hmm.
couple of them had stamps, a couple of them didn't. So I was like, I'm just gonna take these off the page. And then I saw an article in um, the AP, and I was horrified that there was a page of stamps that wasn't the exact type page that these stamps were on. I was like, I should have kept them on the page.
Yeah, yeah, that's how you
But
do it.
there were a few of them that still had that prominence. But the one set of covers I got, they were from when he was the governor.
Hmm.
I actually bought one of the reasons I actually bought it was in a Harmer folder. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like an example of a lot that came out of that auction.
Hmm. Do you have the San Marino stamps of Roosevelt?
Yep.
Okay. I came across another set, so if you know anybody who needs them, let me know.
I will let you know. I'll have to go through those again. I still have them in a box, but one day I want to put them in a
Yeah,
proper
yeah,
album. Same
yeah.
thing with that album you gave me. I don't want to take the album apart, but I want to figure out a way to properly display it.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Preserve it.
Yeah, one of those my favorite stamps is the one. Does Roosevelt have 5 or 6 fingers? And it's gone back and forth.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Hey, I
Yep.
can do that now. Back then, I guess you needed an
Hmm.
engraver to put an extra finger on there.
Yep. Yep.
Needless to say, Roosevelt received a bunch of National Airmail Week covers from various places in the country, and a number of those have been deaccessioned by Harmers. And so it's not unusual to see them on eBay, for example. And I caution you, don't pay a big premium for them because there are lots of them, and I've all the ones I have, I've never had to pay a premium for.
Yeah,
Or just get an old typewriter.
Yeah,
FDR 1600 1300 1600 Hill Pennsylvania Avenue.
yeah, and also covers addressed to Farley. There are
Hmm.
lots of those around too.
Yep. Yeah,
I have a cover that was sent to Roosevelt, but the person I think was it came from the UK, Britain. It was addressed to President Wilson. So, but I only paid $30 for that. So
oh yeah, that's a good one though. I
that
mean,
was a good buy.
that's an interesting error. Other
Yeah.
questions for our speaker or general points? Anything good? No. Now I see two Sally Petoskis. Which one of you is the real one?
Yeah, I'm the.
It's like the old "What's My Line" show. What's your name and what do you really do? Well, glad to have you both.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of you sent me a request for the link tonight, I think. I got one. Yeah, gotcha. Good. Well, we're glad you joined us. And if you want to be on our mailing list, send me an email again, and I'll put your list, and you get it every month when we have our Zoom meetings. We'll be glad to have you here and
Oh, I
enjoy.
finally got the screen back.
Okay.
Here I am.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of this is luck in this business.
Yeah, yeah.
It really is. I'm going to talk to Suzanne in between meetings and see if I can find a way what's going on. I can't screen share because
Yeah.
I have to be able to screen share because if, like I said, you couldn't get on tonight, it's up to me and I can't do it. I want to be able to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, other questions, comments?
Oh, I've got a question.
Yes, Dave.
And with the C-18 and with the other Zeppelins, the C-13, 14, 15, it looks every cover I've seen, pretty much every used example I've seen has been philatelic usage. Was there
Right.
was there has was there ever much non-philatelic usage of these stamps?
I don't think so because the they were on sale, like the Pan American Zeps were on sale for a relatively short time, as I recall. And I'm not so sure, but I think they were only supposed to be used on those flights, if I remember right. If Cheryl were around, she could tell us, but I believe that those Pan American Zeps were only supposed to be used on Zeppelin flights.
Hmm.
So uh I would say there's probably, commercial use of everything, but boy, commercial use of those has to be pretty far and few and far between, should say.
There are some promotional ones, sending out something that really isn't an invoice or a business letter, but is just simply, I'm thinking about you type of thing, just
Yeah,
promotional.
yeah, yeah.
I know the hobby is really divided on philatelic covers. I love them myself. We're all souvenir hunters, whenever we can do that. And yet everybody loves Zeps and their philatelic covers.
I mean,
So,
look at the cam covers, for example. I mean, the vast majority of them are
yeah.
are philatelic,
Hmm.
for God's
Hmm.
sake. And so
Yep.
what?
Yeah.
They're
Have fun.
they're fun. They're commemorating interesting things, and it doesn't bother me at all.
And I
Doesn't
think the
bother me at
same
all.
thing with the 7171 affair, when the Postal Department became kind of a semi-private USPS, and every little town had their cancel ready for the 8-cent stamp that went out, and there's thousands of those, and they're all
Yeah.
philatelic.
I'll tell
And
you the
but people
philatelic
collect
covers
them.
that bother me though. A lot of the Macon covers, the for the airship Macon. I mean, like
Hmm.
I showed a picture of the official visit cover for the Century of Progress. That's fine. That's an important event. But when you have a cover that says the Macon flew over Capistrano today, I mean, who cares? That's stupid. Uh,
Like Sigmund Freud said, you follow the money.
yeah, that's right.
I mean, that all comes down to that.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
I
But
was
most,
gonna say, oh, go ahead, Jim.
go ahead. No.
No, when I was writing that, excuse me. When I was writing that article for my newsletter, I was gonna say a few words about philatelic covers because those Lebanon covers were obviously philatelic, but I was gonna say, and I think I um ended up just leaving this out, but I was gonna use the Zeppelin flight as an example of even though it's a philatelic cover, that people just desire it because it was just a historic event. And I think
Hmm.
that's the value in those type of things. Like my collection of Lebanon covers, which is where I live. My hometown's Lebanon, Pennsylvania, wouldn't be worth a whole lot to somebody, but I was thankful that some guy over 90 years ago put the collection together because it was just a neat thing. And
Hmm.
it's just a snapshot in time. And I think, yeah, a lot of those covers were made by a dealer to make a few bucks on, but they're also appreciated by collectors, back in the day. So to me, that makes them collectible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right.
But it's okay to be a postal historian and look for stuff that had actually a real usage too.
Oh,
It all
sure.
depends on what
Absolutely.
you prefer.
Scott, do
Yep.
you find many in your generation collecting things, or are
Um,
you the outlier, or a little of each?
I think I'm an outlier, but I think a lot of people have, um, a collecting gene. Um, like I go back, or not a collecting gene. That's become a part of our vernacular, I guess. But like a collecting inclination. I'm actually at the point now, not so much with stamps, but definitely with baseball cards, that I'm at the point now where I'm disgusted because people are willing to pay so much money. And now
Yeah.
it's like with the grading of cards and whatnot. I don't want to get into the whole story because it would take a few minutes to tell it
Hmm.
properly. But card grading is just a big scam to me. And I decided one of the things I decided to do, I got all reflective and talked to everybody about turning 50 the other day, but one of the things or the other newsletter, but one of the other things I decided to do was kind of stop buying that stuff. And probably in the next few years, I'm going to gauge my kids' interest in it. And if they're not interested, I'm just going to get rid of it, going to
Mhm.
sell it and try to get some money off of it and try to leave my kids with not so much of a mess to deal with, once it is my time.
Yeah. Yeah. Grading baseball cards. Where does it end?
It's a big
Yeah.
scam, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Good. Questions, comments, anybody? We have more? I know with the Boston show coming up,